Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast. Today, we welcome Amy, where we're going to be talking about self-confidence, being authentically you in the workplace, and much, much more. So just a quick introduction to Amy, and then we'll dive into our conversation today. So Amy is the author of 3 books: Amazon bestseller, Disconnect to Connect, Tap into the Power Within, You Create the Life You Desire, Business, Balance and Bliss, How the B3 method can transform your career and life, and Integrative Advisory Services, How to expand your accounting services beyond the cloud. A TEDx speaker who won the Audience Choice Award for a popular talk called Disconnect to Connect, the host of the Breaking Beliefs podcast and blog to help people continue their journey to find their life's purpose. So welcome to the show today, Amy. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. So could you tell us a little bit about actually what got you into this particular area of helping people in this way?
Sure. So my background is I'm a CPA and started a very traditional path in my career and worked, type A personality, always did, from a workout standpoint, very hardcore workouts. And, that was kind of how I ran my life. And I had gone on the journey of becoming a CPA because that was my grandfather's profession and it been talked about from the time I was little. And so I just went down that path without looking right or left, and went until I was 32 and became a partner in a CPA firm. And at that point, that was my moment of pause, because once I achieved that goal, that career goal that I've been working so hard for, I wasn't as happy as I thought it was going to be at that point. And so it was kind of a perfect storm that at the time, my now 18-year-old had just been born, and I had gotten sick from the pregnancy. So I wasn't allowed to do the workouts I had always done. And I had started yoga at the time. And I also started therapy because I knew I was feeling off and I couldn't figure out why. And it was actually a big thing to go to therapy because in my family, that was looked down upon to go to a therapist, and just knowing I needed it and to walk in the door. And it was we all have these moments of this perfect storm. And at that point in my life, that was the first time I actually allowed myself to think, feel, really kind of understand what was going on internally for me. And yoga was one of those pathways that helped me there. And I started, as a learner, started going down the path of becoming a yoga instructor, and I've owned yoga studios. And through my career, I've really pivoted. I'm still in the accounting profession. I'm still a CPA. I'm not a practicing CPA. I'm a keynote speaker, but I've really merged the philosophies together in what I call the B3 method: business plus balance equals bliss. Because I really started resonating with a lot of the teachings and how it can help you in the workplace, and start really separating, this career drive we have, and what is our purpose, and who do we really, who are we? We don't always question that because we've got all these belief systems and people that are telling us who they need us to be. And so, this path, this methodology really is to help people find who they are, who they authentically are, and find ways to pivot in their life to find more happiness.
Love it. Love it. So yeah, I know clarity, number of people I speak to, and it's a challenge I've had, is kind of that clarity. Where do we go? I'm just a little bit lost, can be a big challenge in your career or your business, in kind of those areas. For perhaps the individual who's, obviously there's a bit of a process, and that's the beauty of working with a coach or someone who can help you. But for the individual who's perhaps so stuck and they're just like, I have absolutely no idea where I want to go, like, have you got any thoughts of where that individual may start? Because I know it's a big challenge for lots of us, right?
Yeah. So I know what I'm about to say is uncomfortable, because one thing that our natural inclination is to run away, quit everything, run away, whatever it is. And what I'm going to say is to just pause, get still. And that's sometimes the hardest thing to do for anybody, is to allow ourselves space. We stay in these very busy lives, sometimes just so that we don't have to think, we don't have to feel. And when we pause and just allow the process to happen, it's amazing what we can learn from ourselves when we actually listen without judgment, right? Like, it's observation. And so this process is really to kind of flip the way of thinking of, rather than judging how you're feeling or where you're at or where you're not at or whatever your expectations are, is to really observe yourself as an outside observer without judgment and do the research. And it just takes time to go through the process of finding that answer. And there's no timeline on that answer. It can just be little things that you do, and over time they start accumulating and you're like, I feel better. But it's listening to that, and it's also communicating to the people around you that you're going through this. A lot of people struggle isolated and internally, and they don't necessarily share that with the people around them of that they are struggling. Or, we have a lot of family demands. I know when I was going through this myself, and we go through this a number of times, it's not like you do it one time, but at this point in my career, when I went through it, and we all have it happen, I was really busy CPA firm partner, and and I was a mom, and so I had all the pressures of being a mom. And so to take time to go to yoga, I felt guilty to do that, because I was already working a lot of hours. And so I had to communicate with my family and say, this is something I need to do. I need an hour before I come home to transition and do this. And what happened over time is, they started seeing I was showing up better just having that space. And so a lot of times we feel guilty to create that space for ourselves, versus realizing that it is a gift to everyone around you. When you do create space, you let your mind release and so forth. And I would say, when you communicate to the people around you that this is what you're going through, this is what you need, then the next question is, what do they need, and how can you help support them too? So it's not just a one-way thing where you're feeling guilty. So if you have a partner or a friend or whoever it is that is going to help support you through that process, then you should also be asking, what do they need and how can you support them, so that it's a give and take, as well, as you're going through this process of just observing what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and trying new things.
Yeah, I like that. There's some good golden nuggets in there, like actually trying some of these things, communicating to people, which I think I'd certainly struggle with. And I know people, I've coached before, struggle with this kind of like day to day and like this busy lifestyle, and we don't make that time for ourselves. We just continue the same norms, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I think some of those things, and actually communicating to them, and then being able to kind of get a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's new, right? Anything new.
Mm.
And this is something that as adults, we're not good at new things. So when we're kids, we're constantly doing new things, and we're actually being forced to try new things. And I love using the example of swim lessons, right? No kid wants to go to swim lessons. They go to swim lessons, they hate swim lessons, and their parent tells them they have to go back to swim lessons. But when we're adults, we start going into where we're experts, right? We start narrowing down our lives into what we're experts in. And it's very uncomfortable to do something that we're new at, or that we're not an expert in. And when we're going through that process, there's no one making us stay on that journey unless we do. And so we have to truly make that commitment on our calendar. This is why communication is a really important thing. Even if you have an accountability partner that can help you through the process, to make sure you stick with it, because we are more easily to tap out and say, this doesn't feel good, so I'm not going to continue to do it, versus allowing your neural channels to create new habits, new patterns in your life, but you have to do it intentionally and you have to work at it. And no one knows they're good at something the first time they do something, right? It takes time. And then you're like, do I like this? After I've given it 30, 60 days, if I don't like it, then try something else, but stay on the path of pushing yourself to be uncomfortable, because that's when the learning happens.
Yeah. I remember like one guy just like the kind of the myelin, I think was, I remember one of my teachers talking about like the myelin sort of like building and stuff, and we want to quit that phase where we're getting frustrated, and then and actually what he talks about, it made sense to me. You might have a different perspective, and it was like it kind of triggers that feeling of not being enough if we can't do something. I don't know if you relate to that, or you found people kind of find that they don't want to fail, they don't want to be bad.
Well, and I think that's part of the problem of being an adult. We've gotten so many bad feedback over time, where, you start being hard on yourself, and our negative self-talk is the worst. Like if someone was actually inside of our heads and heard how we spoke to ourselves, we wouldn't be friends with ourselves, right? Like if someone was speaking to you outside of yourself, that was a person, you wouldn't be friends with them. And so it is really important to observe those thoughts that are coming up for you. And one of the things I talk about in my newest book, The Disconnect to Connect, is these belief systems that happen over time. And with belief systems, they could have come from your parents, somewhere in your childhood, a teacher, even when you started working, just things that people say that you start believing about your workplace, and that's the way it has to be. And so we don't necessarily question those belief systems. They become things we say or we do without really stepping back and saying, does that resonate with me? Do I believe that? And even to your point of talking about feedback, I might have gotten some feedback from somebody at some point that changed how I was, or whether I was confident or not confident, but we never actually decided to step back and pause and observe, like, did that feedback actually resonate with me? Was that coming from something from them that they have an insecurity about, or they have an issue that maybe has nothing to do with me? And what pieces of that feedback are helpful, and what pieces am I sure that in my gut, I know that actually isn't the right thing for me as a person? And we don't necessarily question that. We just take that in and it just starts building over time. And so it is important to hear those messages that are happening in your mind. That's why silence is important, and stillness. And when we do actually question that, are those my thoughts? Do I believe this thought? And really question that thought and let it process. And it's amazing if we were able to release that thought, how we might feel differently, and how we might behave differently, how we might react differently if we didn't have that thought.
Silence is golden. It's a very very difficult thing. I'm guilty of it myself, of finding it in the day sometimes. But when you find it, it's really, really, it can reveal a lot, sometimes uncomfortable things, right? Quite a lot of the time.
Yeah. But you don't even realize it's affecting you without some stillness. So like we have encounters all day long where we're in meetings and so forth, and we just go meeting to meeting to meeting, but we're not actually assessing what energy we're bringing into that meeting. We come away and we say, oh, that person made us mad or frustrated, and we're talking about them, but we also didn't assess ourselves going into it. Were we tired? Were we frustrated from our last meeting? Is something else going on? So we can offset our energy before we enter into that next meeting, or know that we need to be more alert to our energy. And so in 2 minutes, we can reset our central nervous system. So it doesn't take that much silence. It doesn't take that long. And if you build that into your day between meetings or before you're about to start working, and actually give yourself some moments to kind of get silent or move around or listen to music or just shift your mind so that you can be intentional about your next experience, it can really help you in how you're interacting with the people around you.
Love it. Yeah, just time to reset. can be key, especially when we're rushed about all day.
Yeah.
It's sort of what you're saying sounds like it sort of comes back to a lot of self-awareness, which is difficult skill actually.
Mhm.
Things
It's
actually,
a lifelong skill.
yeah, it's a lifelong skill.
You're never a master. It's
No.
just, you get to the point where you are more aware when you're off. Recently I've been having to move and my kids are going to be both going to college and, going through that empty nester phase. And I know that I'm in a sad phase right now, but I still have to function during the day. I still have to, make sure that I'm doing everything that I need to do. And so it's really important for me to acknowledge the feelings that are going on, but also know what I need to do to offset that, whether it's, different workouts, whether it's breathing exercises, whether it's some time off, it's just being, really, really ruthless with yourself to observe it, to not ignore it. And because ignoring it comes out in different ways where, people start seeing you as frustrated or not nice, and that's not what your intention was, and it has nothing to do with them. It has to do about other things that are going on for you.
Yeah, I've pushed things away before as well, and it's not a good thing. So probably all been guilty of it at some
Oh
point.
yeah, it's the human condition.
Yeah, just to push things away. But we're saying, find that time and do it a little bit. And sometimes when I've cried, it's like the best release, when you're just actually feeling things. It's
Yeah.
it's better than just being angry or frustrated all day. It's I'm
Yeah.
open to sharing that and everything. So I guess Amy, one of my a couple more things. I was really interested in, obviously you touched briefly on beliefs.
Mhm.
And do you find people usually, the people you've worked with or seen, is there's usually quite a lot of unawareness to quite a lot of beliefs? Do you find that, or do you find people usually quite aware of their beliefs?
Yeah, most people are not, and that includes, us individually too, when
Yeah.
we're faced with it. And when someone is not, is when you actually question something they say and they get defensive of it, right? They don't want to assess the belief in itself, it's just right. And so and we do it all the time, even when we meet someone, it's just our natural human tendency is, as soon as we meet someone, we're sizing them up and deciding who they are before we actually know them, right? And we don't even mean to do it. We just do it, And so one of those things is really, making sure that when you're holding hard onto a belief system and you find yourself frustrated, whether it's at home or at work or whomever, wherever it is that first part of just being aware that it's happening. Like, you are feeling a frustration. So that's when the questioning should happen, is why am I feeling frustrated, or why do I see that I get the same feedback repeated to me over and over again, whether it's my family, whether it's in the workplace. Like, I'm hearing similar things coming up about myself and I'm rejecting it. I'm pushing it away. And so you can keep pushing up against the wall, or you can actually step back and pause and say, why is that happening? And these are some mindfulness techniques of just that awareness, number one. But, secondly, is if something is coming up over and over again, then really getting present with it and really questioning, why is that happening? And where did that belief come from? So that's really, I wrote the book. It's a lot of my personal stories and teachings that I've learned over time to help create actions that will help you really recognize these things on your own. But a lot of times, what I find, I've done a lot of book discussions since the book has been launched. What's come up a lot is around money. Is, the way people grew up and the way money was viewed. And even if they've gotten out of the situation they were in, when they were younger, that still holds on, right? And we don't really need some of those belief systems anymore. It was somebody else's belief about money. And that wasn't really, it doesn't really go with our lifestyle today or resonate with who we are today. And it could be against money or for money, depending on, how you grew up. I tell the story as well in my book about our life was, probably upper middle class, growing up. And then my mom lost her business and we lost everything. We lost our house. We had to sell everything inside of our house. And that happening created so many belief systems for me as I was growing up of safety. I wanted to make sure I was safe with money, and that never happened again because I had experienced something like that. But until I got older, I didn't realize how many decisions it was affecting. Like, even if I had a full-time job, I'd still have 3 teaching jobs on top of it, or I'd always have the backup to it, which was taking away from things, or I wasn't making certain decisions in my business because I was worried about taking too many risks and things like that. And you don't really assess why that's happening until you pause and say, why is this happening? Why can't I just focus on my full-time job? Oh, that's because I lost everything in the past, but that isn't my current situation. So how do I start getting comfortable with one job so that I can create more space in my life and believe in myself that I can make money, I'm okay. So, where am I covering myself to make sure there's safety in money so that I can not keep thinking like when I was a 16-year-old. And so it's important that we recognize how those things come into our lives and affect our decisions.
Yeah. It comes back to that self-awareness, and you're certainly giving a lot of good tools and guidance on that. And I'm excited to hear about the book. Obviously, that you've written a few, but sounds like that's a real benefit to people. So, Amy, I guess, like, obviously, if people want to find out more about the book or your work, where they can find you, and if there's any final point you'd like to leave us with today.
Sure. So you can go to amyvetter.com, VETTER, and that there's a books link, there's a podcast link, there's all about my speaking programs. We also have a website called businessbalancebliss.com that has courses that you can take as well on finding balance and intentional time management and so forth. All the social media channels are Amy Vetter CPA, just to keep it easy. So whatever your social media choice is, that's where you can find the content that we put out in newsletters and so forth. But I just like to leave everyone with is just to not be so hard on themselves, just to realize that we're all on this journey together. Everyone is struggling something internally. We don't necessarily show it on the outside, and to just have compassion for yourself as you're going through the process.
I love it, Amy. That's a great final point. And really appreciated everything you shared. And yeah, we could go into so much more. And that's why I really guide the listener to check out some more of your resources and content. So yeah, appreciate you coming on today, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember, you are in control of your own self-esteem and confidence.